While governments are responsible for the intelligence gathering necessary to achieve national security, the technology and tools that make it possible are often created and owned by the private sector. Consequently, there are great opportunities for both cooperation and for conflict. Meg King, who serves as National Security Advisor to Wilson Center Director Jane Harmon, sets the scene for the discussion that follows in this edition of Rewind.
The technology we use to collect information didn't come out of thin air. It was created by companies or in partnership with companies, which the government then at some point purchased and took hold of. The difference that we hear from the American public, the concerns they have about technology and privacy, whether it relates to surveillance, whether it relates to their communications, is this idea of opting in. They believe they have the opportunity to opt into a private sector technology and to allow a company to use their information, whereas they don't have that opportunity with the U.S. government. So that is a critical element in this conversation about technology and the future of surveillance. Private sector companies actually have a really important role in that conversation. And if they don't explain their own privacy protections and what they're looking at improving, then the conversation about surveillance in general will not move forward. And we will probably lose some capabilities because of that.
The reporting by the Washington Post that intelligence agencies were sort of tapping the links between our data centers came as a shock to us, and we were outraged by it. We continue to be. I think that just underscores the importance of shoring up our security and ensuring that we're taking an aggressive posture when we're advocating before the courts and Congress. But this continues to be a huge challenge for us.
The companies weren't making complaints about government requests, and they weren't, in any uproar over government surveillance until the Snowden revelations, and really until the public got in an uproar about it. So I'm wondering, is this stance that they're taking more PR? Is it genuine? Will we see it go away when the public concern about this goes away?
It's tough to see this as an outsider and not think that it's largely about PR and about appeasing their unhappy customers abroad. I mean, it's true. Google and the other tech companies have in fact brought some action at the FISA court with a very narrow focus on their desire to publish statistics with greater degree of granularity. But that's basically privacy theater. Where is the litigation to challenge the orders themselves?
I think in many ways people are maybe looking too much kind of at the law to provide kind of the safeguards for these questions about fundamental protections of civil liberties and privacy and to put kind of a check on government surveillance. And I think that currently US law is not doing that job.
We do provide tools for our users to opt out of the collection of that data. The point that I was making, more broadly speaking, is if you look at the underlying data in our transparency reports, the type of data that the government is seeking.
But the NSA doesn't make a request to you to hack into one of your users. They just watch the network and look for the cookie. And so that transparency report isn't going to touch. It's not going to show any of the other things the NSA does.
How do we ensure that companies start thinking this way during the development point? How do we ensure that they are thinking about privacy and security before they're even just on the idea board? And how do we ensure, and is there any way for us to ensure that they're not taking steps to undermine the technology that they're giving us to make it more susceptible to surveillance?
There are certain industries that do bad things, and it's the role of policymakers and civil society to draw them back in. People have been criticizing the surveillance infrastructure that the internet advertising industry has created for a decade. Right? And what they did in response to the threat of regulation was to deploy an army of lobbyists to resist congressional regulation, to resist industry standards like do not track.
My name is Jan Bates. I'm just a private citizen. Isn't it true that the average user is in much greater danger from criminal hackers, from Russian, Chinese hackers than they are from the NSA?
Americans do face real cybersecurity threats, and it's for that reason that the government should be doing everything in its power to protect internet security. And the problem is, because the US government's surveillance capabilities depend on weaknesses in internet security, we're stuck with this choice, right? The government can either make things more secure and thus frustrate Chinese hackers or Russian hackers, or they can keep things insecure and enable their own surveillance. And clearly what they're doing is they're optimizing for surveillance. When you get the intelligence that tells you that the bad guy is over here, and you learn that that person has an iPhone, that's not the moment to suddenly tell your engineers, okay, now go look for an iPhone Ode, right? You don't build the weapon the moment you need it. You need to have the weapon ready to go. And what that means then is if the government is going to maintain a zero-day stockpile in web browsers, in mobile applications, in operating systems, they're going to be developing and stockpiling them before they really even know the particular instances they're going to be used.
For more information on surveillance and a range of security issues and topics, visit wilsoncenter.org.